Hello everyone, and welcome back to Game Easy, Roll Good. We are continuing our series on the subclass changes for spellcasters in the Dungeons & Dragons Player's Handbook for 2024. But before I get started with that, if you are new to this channel or if you just keep coming back to these videos but haven't subscribed yet, please consider hitting that subscribe button. It helps me out quite a bit. But yes, today we're talking about the Sorcerer, and again, all these videos for the subclass changes are available in a playlist down in the description as well as on my channel page. You can find it there as well. All of the spellcasting base class changes were released last week, and in the weeks prior to that, the martial base class and subclass changes were all released as well. All of those are available in playlists on my channel page. You can go check them out there if you haven't seen them yet. But let's talk about the Sorcerer, because maybe they're born with it. The Sorcerer has had a lot of pretty great changes, even just as a base class. They have that innate sorcery that's basically like a sorceress sort of rage feature. They've had some interesting changes to their meta magics as well. They're just a much more interesting class as far as the base class goes. So hopefully we can see a lot of positive changes with the subclasses as well. So let's go ahead and jump right into it and see what we're working with. So starting with our subclass preview, I had to break it up between two slides here because the text on the description was so long for them. We're starting with the Aberrant Sorcery subclass, as well as the Clockwork Sorcery subclass. These were some of the newer subclasses, so it's interesting to see so many of them in one class in the 2024 Player's Handbook. I'm including the descriptions here. I'm not going to read them, but I'm including the descriptions because the designers said that not only did they want the base classes to feel more like that class, but the subclasses should also feel more emblematic of the themes that are going on with it. So the additional subclasses that we have in the 2024 Player's Handbook are Draconic Sorcery, as well as Wild Magic Sorcery. So these are two of the Sorcerer subclasses from the original 2014 Player's Handbook. I think Draconic Sorcery was always pretty popular. It gives you a lot of good benefits, especially at the first level. And then Wild Magic, I think, is always some sort of a fan favorite, but has always been very hard to use, even in the 2014 rules. So we'll see what kind of changes they made to that one to maybe make it a little more consistent, even though it's kind of antithetical to the whole idea of Wild Magic. So starting off with the Aberrant Sorcery subclass. And again, we're starting off at level 3 because all subclasses are now gained at level 3, whereas it was level 1 previously for the Sorcerer. So we're starting off with psionic spells. Again, much like some of the other classes, level 1 and 3 spells are now merged into level 3. So there's an array of different spells available at level 3. In 2024, they have Arms of Hadar, Calm Emotions, Detect Thoughts, Dissonant Whispers, and Mind Sliver, which are all the same spells that they had in 2014. It's just all bunched into one level. The one thing that they did change for this feature, and I'm not a fan of this change, and if you were ever in my play group and I was the DM, you could still do this in my opinion. I really liked this part of the old spell table for them, is that you're no longer able to switch out spells of certain spell schools. So in 2014, you can see the bolded text here. It says, when you gain a Sorcerer level, you can replace one of the spells you gained from this feature with another spell of the same level. The new spell must be a divination or an enchantment spell from the Sorcerer, Warlock, or Wizard spell list. So that text is just removed in 2024. So unfortunately, you don't have that flexibility anymore, which I think is really sad. That was kind of one of my favorite features of both the Aberrant Sorcerer and the Clockwork Sorcerer. Also at level 3, you get telepathic speech. I'm not going to go ahead and read through this one. It is completely unchanged. You do have it's a bonus action. Choose one creature you can see within 30 feet of yourself. You can communicate with them telepathically. It lasts a certain amount of time. Exactly the same as it was pre-2024. So no need to go into too much detail on this one. For Psionic Sorcery at level 6, in 2024 it says when you cast any level 1 or higher spell from your Psionic Spells feature, that's the spell list that we looked at just before, you can cast it by expending a spell slot as normal, or by spending a number of sorcery points equal to the spell's level. If you cast the spell using sorcery points, it requires no verbal or somatic components, and it requires no material components unless they are consumed by the spell or have a cost specified in it. So the one and only thing that changed here is that it no longer ignores material components that have a specified cost. It is technically a nerf, but I'm not surprised that they made such a change because they've been doing that kind of across the board with other similar features that do similar things. Also at level 6, we have Psychic Defenses. In 2024, this says you have resistance to psychic damage, and you have advantage on saving throws to avoid or end the charmed or frightened condition. So the big thing here is that you now explicitly have advantage to both avoid the condition as well as end the condition, whereas in 2014 it just says that you have advantage on saving throws against being charmed or frightened to avoid that condition being put on you. but once it was on you, if you failed that save regardless, you no longer had advantage to end the condition on you. So in 2024, they made that change where you have advantage on both the initial application of the condition, and then if you fail that save, you still have advantage on subsequent saves against that. So very positive feature there. Moving on to the level 14 feature, we have Revelation in Flesh. This is completely unchanged from the 2014 version. Again, I'm not going to go and read through this whole thing. They just made it look a little nicer with the nice bolded formatting here. And for the capstone for the Aberrant sorcery, in 2024, it says, as a magic action, you can teleport to an unoccupied space you can see within 120 feet of yourself. Immediately after you disappear, each creature within 30 feet of the space you left must make a strength saving throw against your spell save DC. On a failed save, a creature takes 3d10 force damage and is pulled straight towards the space you left, ending in an unoccupied space as close to your former space as possible. On a successful save, the creature takes half as much damage only. Once you use this feature, you can't do so again until you finish a long rest, unless you spend 5 sorcery points, no action required, to restore your use of it. So the only real change here is that it now is specifically a magic action, which makes a lot of sense, but it does technically prevent you from using it if you took 2 levels in fighter and to get action surge. If you used your action to do one thing and then you action surge, you couldn't use this because it is a magic action. But I don't think there's any mechanical, or at least that we know of so far, there's no other mechanical interactions where that would specifically prevent a magic action. Not yet, anyway. Moving on to the Clockwork sorcery. So again, this is one of the other sort of newish subclass. I can't remember exactly what it was released in, probably Tasha's or one of those. This was kind of I think this is my favorite of those 2 classes, the Aberrant Sorcerer and the Clockwork Sorcerer. I really liked the themes and the way that the Clockwork Sorcerer just works in general. So in 2024, much like the spell list for the Aberrant Sorcerer, the Clockwork Magic spell list also combines the level 1 and 3 spells. All of the same spells are here, and just like the Aberrant Sorcerer spell list, you can no longer switch out those spells to certain spell schools. For the Clockwork Magic Sorcerer, this was the abjuration and transmutation spells. You could change any of the spells in this list when you gained a level in Sorcerer to an abjuration or transmutation spell from the Warlock, Wizard, or Sorcerer spell list. So it gave you a lot of flexibility, and you could get cool things like, the Armor of Agathis was a good one that people like to get. And there's just a lot of cool different spells that you could have got, but that you can no longer get in 2024 if you're playing by those strict rules. Again, if you were playing at my table, I'd still let you do this because I just think it's cool. But in 2024, they just removed that text for whatever reason. And also at level 3, we have Restore Balance. In 2024, this says when a creature you can see within 60 feet of yourself is about to roll a d20 with advantage or disadvantage, you can take a reaction to prevent the roll from being affected by advantage or disadvantage. You can use this feature a number of times equal to your Charisma modifier, a minimum of once, and you regain all expended uses when you finish a long rest. So the main change here is that the number of uses is now tied to your Charisma modifier, whereas in pre-2024, it was tied to your proficiency bonus. So this will likely be higher early on, and then it'll be less by the end of the game until you get your Charisma score to 22, because your proficiency scales to +6, whereas you can only get to +5 Charisma under normal circumstances. You do get +1 from an epic boon, and if you multi-class in a certain way, you technically could get 22 without any other external buffs or anything like that maybe a DM gifts you or anything like that. At level 6 for the Clockwork Sorcerer, we have Bastion of Law. In 2024, it says, as a magic action, you can expend 1 to 5 sorcery points to create a magical ward around yourself or another creature you can see within 30 feet of yourself. The ward is represented by a number of d8s equal to the number of sorcery points spent to create it. When the warded creature takes damage, it can expend a number of those dice, roll them, and reduce the damage taken by the total rolled on those dice. The ward lasts until you finish a long rest or until you use this feature again. Basically unchanged other than the fact that it's a magic action. That's the only real change to this one. Moving on to level 14, we have Trance of Order. This is a pretty cool feature. You can take the time to read it here. Again, this is a completely unchanged feature in 2024. Again, we're not surprised to see that a lot of things are basically unchanged for these 2 subclasses, the Clockwork and Aberrant Sorcerer. Again, because they are so new, so they already are using a lot of the modern terminology and modern framework for class design. And then finally, at level 18, we have Clockwork Cavalcade. This is the capstone for the Clockwork Sorcerer. It says, as a magic action, you summon the spirits in a 30-foot cube originating from you. The spirits look like Modrons or other constructs of your choice. The spirits are intangible and invulnerable, and they create the effects below in the cube before vanishing. Once you use this action, you can't use it again until you finish a long rest, unless you spend 7 sorcery points, no action required to restore your use of it. So you have a heal option. The spirits restore up to 100 hit points divided as you choose among any number of creatures in the cube. Repair. Any damaged objects entirely in the cube are repaired instantly. And then finally, dispel. Every spell of 6th level and lower ends on the creatures and objects of your choice within the cube. So again, when you use this feature, and again, the only real change here is that it's a magic action technically now. All of these things happen, so you can heal some people, you can repair some stuff, and then you can dispel all your enemies' buffs or area of effects and things like that. So that's pretty cool too. And then moving on to the Draconic sorcery. Starting at level 3, we have Draconic Resilience. It says your hit point maximum increases by 3, and it increases by 1 whenever you gain another sorcerer level. In addition, parts of you are also covered by dragon-like scales. When you aren't wearing armor, your base armor class equals 10 plus your dexterity and charisma modifiers. So the hit point boost is basically the same. It's just adjusting the numbers since you get your subclass at level 3 now instead of level 1. And the change to the armor class is also very cool because it means that you're very likely to have just a higher armor class as a Draconic Sorcerer unless you intentionally dump dexterity for whatever reason. Because eventually you'll have a +5 charisma and maybe you have like a +2 to dexterity to start off. Before you can start buffing other things. That's at least a 17 AC, which is pretty respectable for a spellcaster without any other protection. And then if you keep buffing dexterity, then you can get up to 18, 19, even 20 if you have +5 charisma and +5 dexterity if you manage that. So that's actually pretty beefy for a spellcaster. Moving on to level 3 as well, we have the Draconic spell list. So in 2014, you did not have a spell list for the Draconic Sorcerer, so it's nice to see that they added one here. So at level 3, you have Alter Self, Chromatic Orb, Command, and Dragon's Breath. At level 5, you have Fear and Fly. Level 7, you have Arcane Eye and Charm Monster. And then finally at level 9, you get Legend Lore and Summon Dragon. I don't think this is the strongest spell list by any means, but I think it's very flavorful for a Draconic Sorcerer to have these specific spells. So just overall, and again, they didn't have one before, so you're not really losing anything. So overall, just a great change no matter what. Moving on to level 6, we see Elemental Affinity. In 2024, this says your Draconic magic has an affinity with the damage type associated with dragons. Choose one of these damage types, Acid, Cold, Fire, Lightning, or Poison. You have resistance to that damage type, and when you cast a spell that deals damage of that type, you can add your charisma modifier to 1 damage roll of that spell. I thought it was a little strange that you make this choice so late, although it's technically not really a choice, they're just kind of reframing the way that the 2014 version worked. So instead of having to spend a sorcery point whenever you cast a spell of the damage type that is associated with your Draconic ancestor, you just have resistance to whatever damage type you choose. It doesn't even need to be the same as the type of your ancestor if you wanted it to. And you don't need to spend a sorcery point on it anymore. You don't need to cast a spell to trigger that. So overall, just a very positive change in it. And whatever the resistance you choose is the spell damage type that you buff with your charisma modifier as well. So I think I overall like the way this one works better than in 2014. At level 14, we have Dragon Wings. In 2024, it says, as a bonus action, you can cause Draconic wings to appear on your back. The wings last for 1 hour or until you dismiss them, no action required. For the duration, you have a fly speed of 60 feet. Once you use this feature, you can't use it again until you finish a long rest. Unless you spend 3 sorcery points, no action required, to restore your use of it. So notably, this no longer has any armor or clothing restrictions, but instead it now has a duration of 1 hour. It has limited uses where you can use it once per long rest unless you spend sorcery points to activate it again. And there's no action required to dismiss it, so if you need to get rid of it suddenly for whatever reason, you can. The fly speed is also set to 60 feet, which is the same of the fly spell. In 2014, it was set to whatever your current speed was. On one hand, this isn't a permanent enhancement anymore, so that's a bit of a nerf there. But they did buff it a little bit. I don't know if it's enough to make up for permanent wings because permanent wings is very powerful. Even if you had to have like specific armor made in a way such that you could have wings. But overall, I think this is a decent feature. Again, it is a pretty big nerf to not have permanent flight, but overall, it's still pretty good. And finally, at the capstone for the Draconic Sorcerer at level 18, we have Dragon Companion. This is completely different from the 2014 version, where that was called Draconic Presence, that basically give you sort of like the the frightening aura that a dragon has, but instead now in 2024 it says you can cast Summon Dragon without a material component. You can also cast it once without a spell slot, and you regain the ability to cast it this way when you finish a long rest. Whenever you start casting the spell, you can modify it so that it doesn't require concentration. If you do, the spell's duration becomes 1 minute for that casting. So you might notice that this doesn't give you Summon Dragon, but remember that we do have a Draconic Sorcery spell list now, and you do get that at level 9. It does say that you can cast it once without a spell slot, and it's worth noting that when you do cast something for free without using a spell slot, that you cast it at its minimum level, and Summon Dragon is a 5th level spell. So if you do it that way, that means that it is a 5th level Summon Dragon at where you're level 18, which means that it only has the 50 hit points, and it's maybe going to be a little softer and easier to kill than it would be if you cast it at a higher level spell slot, if you ever wanted to do that. But the fact that you can also get just a concentration-free companion is very good. Overall, I think this is a pretty good change. The ability to modify it so that it doesn't require concentration is not linked to the free casting of the spell. And again, you get more hit points, more everything, more attacks, depending on how many, what level of the spell that you cast it at. You probably have maybe you have better things that you could do with like your 8th level spell slot. But if you wanted to just summon a concentration-free dragon companion with Summon Dragon at 8th level, you could technically do that. It's concentration-free, and then you can do all the other things you can still do as a sorcerer with your concentration. So I think that's pretty cool. A very nice choice to have if you're able to find a good situation for that. And finally, moving on to Wild Magic Sorceries. So at level 3 for Wild Magic, we start off with the Wild Magic Surge. So in 2024, it says once per turn, you can roll at 1d20 immediately after you cast a sorcerer spell with a spell slot. If you roll a 20, roll on the Wild Magic Surge table to create a magical effect. Additionally, it says if the magical effect is a spell, it is too wild to be affected by your meta magic. And then from the 2014, we can see that there's some text that has been removed. So it says once per turn, the DM can have you roll a d20 after you cast a spell. So that was just completely removed. So it's now basically up to the player to determine when that happens. Whenever you cast a spell using a spell slot, specifically a sorcerer spell, you roll the d20 and then you make that happen if you roll a 20. Also, the Wild Magic Surge occurs on a 20 instead of 1. This is basically unchanged. It's the same percentage chance to roll a 20 and a 1. But maybe this is more of a psychological association that we associate a natural 20 with positive things, whereas a natural 1 is a negative outcome in our brains. So they might have changed it to just a 20 because that's more exciting for us to see a 20 on the die. And the ignoring concentration part is now a part of the effect descriptions on the Wild Magic table, even though it was removed from the feature itself. That text is now in the Wild Magic table for the spells where it's relevant. So we're going to go over the Wild Magic Surge table because that itself has also been changed pretty significantly. So the 2024 Wild Magic Surge table has only half the possible results as in 2014, although that's a little deceptive. Instead of every 2 numbers from 1 to 100 being a possible result, every 4 numbers is one possible result. So there's basically 25 results possible. But some results require other random rolls to create another random effect, which basically extends the number of possible results. The majority of the results are positive, such that once you have the controlled chaos feature that we'll look at later, the likelihood of you getting a negative result is almost non-existent. Only 8 of the effects from 2014 have been completely removed. And so there are 49 total possible effects in 2024, accounting for effects that require an additional roll for a random effect. So the new table only effectively has 1 less possible effect compared to 2014. So you're twice as likely to get any one individual result on the D100 die. But some of those rolls, some of those results, and we'll see what I'm talking about in a little bit, have other rolls within them that you have to make. So what the heck am I talking about? Let's take a look. So starting off with the rolls here, again, things highlighted in yellow, they weren't necessarily removed. They're just somewhere else on the list. So that's something to keep in mind as well. I'm just going to read the 2024 side. You're welcome to read the 2014 side. So in 2024, if you roll a 1 to 4 on the D100, you roll on this table at the start of each of your turns for the next minute, ignoring this result on subsequent rolls. If you roll a 5 to 8, a creature that is friendly towards you appears in a random unoccupied space within 60 feet of you. The creature is under the DM's control and disappears 1 minute later. Roll 1d4 to determine the creature. On a 1, a Modron Duodrone appears. On a 2, a Flumph appears. On a 3, a Modron Monodrone appears. And on a 4, a Unicorn appears. And then you can refer to the monster manual for the creature's stat block. So this is what I was talking about, where and certain features where you have a sub role to have different features. So you can see on the right side in 2014 for the 5 to 8 that 5 to 6 it just summoned a Modron. So a lot of these other roles that existed in 2014 were bundled into a similar role on the 2024 table. So looking at the result for 9 to 12, for the next minute you regain 5 hit points at the start of each of your turns. Moving on to rolls 13 to 16 on the D100. In 2024, it says creatures have disadvantage on saving throws against the next spell you cast in the next minute that involves a saving throw. For 17 to 20, it says you are subjected to an effect that lasts for 1 minute unless the description says otherwise. Roll 1d8 to determine the effect. On a 1, you're surrounded by a faint ethereal music only you and creatures within 5 feet of you can hear. On a 2, your size increases by 1 size category. On a 3, you grow a long beard made of feathers that remains until you sneeze, at which point the feathers explode from your face and vanish. On a 4, you must shout when you speak. On a 5, illusory butterflies flutter in the air within 10 feet of you. On a 6, an eye appears on your forehead, granting you advantage on wisdom perception checks. On a 7, pink bubbles float out of your mouth whenever you speak. And on an 8, your skin turns a vibrant shade of blue for 24 hours or until the effect is ended by a remove curse spell. Moving on to 21 to 24. In 2024, this says for the next minute, all of your spells with a casting time of an action have a casting time of a bonus action. For 25 to 28, you are transported to the astral plane until the end of your next turn. You then return to the space you previously occupied or the nearest unoccupied space if that space is occupied. And then on 29 to 32, the next time you cast a spell that deals damage within the next minute, you don't roll the spell's damage dice for the damage. Instead, you use the highest number possible for each damage die. At 33 to 36 in 2024, it says you have resistance to all damage for the next minute. 37 to 40, you turn into a potted plant until the start of your next turn. While you're a plant, you have the incapacitated condition. You have vulnerability to all damage. If you drop to 0 hit points, your pot breaks and your form reverts. For 41 to 44, for the next minute, you can teleport 20 feet as a bonus action on each of your turns. 45 to 48, in 2024, it says you and up to 3 creatures you choose within 30 feet of yourself have the invisible condition for 1 minute. This invisibility ends on a creature immediately after it makes an attack roll, deals damage, or casts a spell. 49 to 52, a spectral shield hovers near you for the next minute, granting you +2 bonus to AC and immunity to magic missile. And then 53 to 56, you can take 1 extra action this turn. Moving on to 57 through 60. In 2024, it says you cast a random spell. If the spell normally requires concentration, it doesn't require concentration in this case. The spell lasts for its full duration. Roll a 1d10 to determine the spell. On a 1, you cast Confusion. On a 2, you cast Fireball, and notably, you no longer cast Fireball centered on yourself. You get to choose where it goes. On a 3, you cast Fog Cloud. On 4, you cast Fly, cast on a random creature within 60 feet of you. On a 5, you cast Grease. On a 6, you cast Levitate, cast on yourself. On a 7, you cast Magic Missile, cast as a level 5 spell. On an 8, you cast Mirror Image. On a 9, you cast Polymorph, cast on yourself. And if you fail the saving throw on this polymorph, you turn into a goat. And then on a 10, you cast See Invisibility. For 61 to 64, it says, for the next minute, any flammable, non-magical object you touch that isn't being worn or carried by another creature bursts into flame, takes 1d4 fire damage, and is burning. Burning is a keyword thing that means that it takes fire damage at the start of each of its turns. And then at 65 to 68, it says, if you die within the next hour, you immediately revive as if by the reincarnate spell. I think that's actually kind of a funny one, because again, you eventually get a feature that sort of allows you to choose, or maybe have a better choice of which one that you get, or specifically choose which one you get. So if you know that you're going into like a deadly encounter, you can kind of put this sort of semi-death ward on yourself, where if you do die during an encounter, you just automatically resurrect, so that's a potentially pretty powerful combo. And then moving on to 69 to 72, it says you have the Frightened condition until the end of your next turn. The DM determines your source of fear. At 73 to 76, you teleport up to 60 feet to an unoccupied space you can see. And then 77 through 80, a random creature within 60 feet of you has the Poisoned condition for 1d4 hours. Moving on to 81 through 84, in 2024, this says you radiate a bright light in a 30-foot radius for the next minute. Any creature that ends its turn within 5 feet of you has the blinded condition until the end of its next turn. 85 through 88. Up to 3 creatures of your choice that you can see within 30 feet of you take 1d10 necrotic damage. You regain hit points equal to the sum of the necrotic damage dealt. And then 89 through 92. Up to 3 creatures of your choice that you can see within 30 feet of you take 4d10 lightning damage. Finally, at 93 to 96. In 2024, you and all creatures within 30 feet of you have vulnerability to piercing damage for the next minute. And then 97 through 100, you roll on a d6. On a 1, you regain 2d10 hit points. On a 2, one ally of your choice within 300 feet of you regains 2d10 hit points. On a 3, you regain your lowest level expended spell slot. On a 4, one ally of your choice within 300 feet of you regains their lowest level expended spell slot. On a 5, you regain all of your expended sorcery points. And then on a 6, all of the effects of rows 17 to 20, this is the roll of 17 to 20, affect you simultaneously. And this was the one that kind of give you the feather beard, bubbles coming out of your mouth, those things like that. I think the third eye, that gives you advantage on perception checks as well. So nothing too crazy with that one. But if you roll a 6 on this one, then you just get all of those right away. All right, moving on to the other level 3 feature for the Wild Magic Sorcerer, we have Tides of Chaos. In 2024, this says you can manipulate chaos itself to give yourself advantage on 1d20 test before you roll a d20. And again, d20 tests are attack rolls, ability checks, and saving throws. Once you do so, you must cast a sorcerer spell with a spell slot or finish a long rest before you can use this feature again. If you do cast a sorcerer spell with a spell slot before you finish a long rest, you automatically roll on the Wild Magic Surge table. So this now puts the Wild Magic Surge ability 100% in the player's control, which is a huge quality of life change and allows the player to be much proactive and strategic with when those Wild Magic surges go off. I really like this change a lot. Previously, your DM had to have you roll on the Wild Magic Surge table. They decided when this thing came back, but now you have a lot of control over this whole feature. And this is sort of the linchpin feature for the Wild Magic Sorcerer. It's like, this is what you're going to be manipulating your Wild Magic Surges with. So there's a lot of interesting gameplay that you can now do. I'm really excited to eventually play a Wild Magic Sorcerer. I really want to kind of dig into this and see how it feels. All right, moving on to level 6, we have Bend Luck. It says in 2024, immediately after another creature you can see rolls a d20 for a d20 test, you can take a reaction and spend 1 sorcery point to roll 1d4 and apply the number rolled as a bonus or penalty, your choice, to the d20 roll. So this now costs 1 sorcery point, whereas previously it was 2, so it's cheaper. The wording around timing is different, but effectively the same. Immediately after, to me, would indicate that you can see the result on the dice, but you don't get to know what the effects are. At level 14, we have Controlled Chaos. This is exactly the same as it was in 2014. It says when you roll on the Wild Magic Surge table, you roll twice and then you use either number, so you have a little bit more control over what happens on the Wild Magic Surge. So at level 18, this is the capstone for the Wild Magic Sorcerer. This is completely different from 2014, where it had Spell Bombardment. This was completely removed. And in 2024, it says, immediately after you cast a sorcerer spell with a spell slot, you can create an effect of your choice from the Wild Magic Surge table instead of rolling on that table. You can choose any effect in the table except for the final row. And if the chosen effect involves a roll, you must make it. So for those ones that had like you roll like a d4 or a d6 or whatever to have a random effect, you still need to make that roll. You don't get to choose which sub effect that you get. Once you use this feature, you can't do so until you finish a long rest. So this new capstone basically allows you to force a Wild Magic Surge of your choice once per long rest. This can also be technically stacked with the random Wild Magic Surge if you're refreshing Tides of Chaos on the same cast of the spell. So overall, really great features for the Wild Magic Sorceress. So let's go ahead and move on to the overview. So starting with the most improved subclass, I think I just have to give that to the Wild Magic Sorcerer. Again, it is such a much more table-friendly subclass now that it's completely within the player's control. They choose when things happen. There's very little DM adjudication to determine when things happen, or, like, DM, do I get my Wild Magic Surge now? Do I get my Tides of Chaos back now? That is all gone. I'm really impressed with the way that they modified the Wild Magic Sorcerer. For the most nerfed subclass, I don't think there really is one. You could maybe give it to both the Abberant Sorcerer and the Clockwork Sorcerer because you can't trade their spells out anymore in 2014. But again, if it's my table, or if I'm trying to schmooze my DM, I might say, hey, can I do this please? Or if I'm the DM, I'm like, you can just do this. I think it's fine. But otherwise, there's generally just positive changes for the Sorcerer in 2024. And then finally, for the most hype subclass, and again, I don't like to double up on subclasses and these sort of things, but we have 2 subclasses that basically have no changes and then 2 subclasses that do have changes. But I still think I have to give this to the Wild Magic Sorcery because it is so positively changed. Again, it's much more table friendly. It is all on the player to make their decisions with very little DM adjudication, except for like choosing the source of fear on one roll or choosing controlling a certain creature that gets summoned. There's like 2 things in the entire subclass on the Wild Magic table that involve the DM in some way. Just a really great subclass. I'm really excited to see how this one plays out. So let me know down in the comments, how do you feel about the Sorcerer subclass changes in 2024? Have you got a chance to play any of them yet? Specifically the Wild Magic Sorcerer. This is the one that I'm the most excited about for sure. How does it feel? Is it much better now? So again, let me know down in those comments. And again, while you're going down to those comments, please hit that like button. If you haven't subscribed to this channel yet and you're either a new viewer and you liked what you saw or you're a returning viewer and you just haven't subscribed yet, please consider hitting that subscribe button. It helps me out quite a bit. And then we're going to move on to the Warlock subclass in the next video, so you have that to look forward to. And again, I appreciate all you guys' time, and I'll see you in the next one.